This long distance from Bangalore, where I am now retired, just in order to be a part of this event. I cannot think of a greater honor. I'm deeply touched also by this gesture, and I do hope that all the dreams and hopes of the JNUTA that has organized this 4-day celebration will be met. There was a very, very positive sign of this yesterday at the Adda. I was simply overwhelmed by the response to that event, by the students of JNU in particular, who seem to be thirsting for an event like this. It seems like they have been deprived. There's been a drought of events of this kind which were so common in the time before, of course, COVID, but also before this onslaught on JNU actually began. Before I introduce our very, very distinguished panel, we have one thing in common. We are all retired professors of the university. Having said that, I should say that there is one thing we do not have in common. They are all very distinguished professors and continue to be distinguished even in their retired life. I am merely an extinguished professor. So I claim that of being an extinguished professor. But as a historian, I cannot resist saying a few words, and I'm taking largely from our introduction to the JNU Stories book, about the founding of this institution, this rocky plateau that became the township of the learned. The township of the learned, I cannot think of a better phrase. It was coined by Kiranath Singh. I'm giving you the English translation, but it has indeed been a township of the learned. It was envisaged, as all of you know, in the late 1960s as an institution of, and I quote, an entirely new type. So what was this National University to be? It was to be a new type of university that was a critical, secular, interdisciplinary, inclusive, and I think this I'll come back to in just a moment, encouraging from the outset the autonomy of the schools and centers. And I think we'll hear more about this in each of the speeches of our panelists. So what was created was really a very unique teaching learning system that has survived despite these extraordinary vicissitudes, which, as you famously know, encouraged debate, encouraged discussion and dissent, both within the classrooms and well beyond. And we have a wonderful chapter in our JNU Stories contributed by Judte Kaviraj about the philosophy of the night. Because we all know, those of us who were both students here as well as those who were teachers, that the liveliness of the debates in the messes after dinner is something that can never be forgotten. That was the doubling of the university, if you like, that happened outside the classroom walls. And there was a very high level of participation. This too must be signaled and acknowledged by the student body. The student body itself was producing this extraordinary, lively teaching, learning atmosphere. It was also, and I would like to say this right at the outset, because this is such an important formative influence for all of us, a site of unlearning. There were things that one had to unlearn when you entered the walls of JNU. You had to unlearn the kinds of gender norms which you were bringing into the campus, the hierarchical, patriarchal norms, ideas of deference, and it produced, in my view, a very rare kind of degree of democratic civility. Everybody, as you know, talks about the extraordinary freedom that women students experienced and continue, I hope, to experience within this campus, and that was not achieved so easily. The kinds of institutions that JNU set up in order to ensure this kind of democratic civility, the unlearning of, our country is rich in hierarchies, difference, and so on and so forth. So many of these had to be unlearned within these spaces through, such innovative measures as the JNU student body elections, which are conducted by students themselves, and of course the very fine contributions that were made by GS Cash to ensure gender sensitivity and protection against sexual harassment. These are examples that have been held up not just nationwide but also internationally. We also have a rather unique system which was introduced in the mid-70s itself of deprivation points, which improved the extraordinarily rare inclusivity of this campus on the basis of regional, class and caste deprivations. I want to just signal one more thing, and that is the reputation of JNU as a space of academic excellence is not unwarranted. It is very much warranted, and it has been acknowledged that there has been a very, very high degree of productivity in terms of research and publications, disproportionately high considering the number of faculty that we have, because there is a disproportionate presence of JNU in social science publications. I know that Ram will probably also correct me there on the science front, and I look forward to that, but I simply want to cite one Social Science Research Council report which clearly indicated that JNU's contribution to the world of scholarship was out of all proportion to its numbers. So there is something to be said for the place as not just being a place in which instruction was done, but also very high level research and writing as well. And it is precisely the achievement of this township of the learned and the widespread presence of JNU as a very special critical way of thinking across India, because now, as you know, we are no longer confined to these, to this campus and to these walls. We're happy to know, and we all know this, that there are students who are teaching in institutions right across India and the world. It is precisely because of the critical influence that JNU has had on Indian intellection that there was a sustained attack that began in 2016 on its culture of teaching and learning. And there's this lazy shorthand that always calls those from JNU as leftists, because this is of course a Marxist redoubt. And yet we have, what can I say, the dubious distinction of at least producing two of the most hyper-visible political figures of our present moment from the exact opposite end of the spectrum. That too is JNU, right? These I believe are the achievements that stand, under scrutiny and are under attack today. Beginning, as I said, in these fateful days of February 2016, but face a greater and braver challenge from the new education policy itself, which has now been announced and instituted. I come from the state which has rather proudly declared itself as a state that is the first to implement this new education policy, which threatens to dismantle the public university as a system as we have known it. And so we need to spend, I think, and this is an appropriate moment for such a celebration, we're not just looking back with nostalgia, we're also looking back at the kinds of long-term impacts that have been made by what was achieved in JNU. But we would also, and I hope that some of our panelists will be talking about this, reflecting on what JNU could have done better and what we could have done to perhaps anticipate some of the extraordinary challenges of this new setting. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce this extremely distinguished panel. Yesterday, after the very wonderful, witty introductions to speakers in the Adda, one person suggested, I think it was Professor Jodte, that don't introduce us, just Google the writers and you'll get their CVs right up there. But I'm going to not miss this opportunity to introduce our very, very distinguished panel. Just to tell you also that there is a format to what is going to be followed, but we have a very strict kind of end point, which is 4 o'clock, because there are other events that are going to happen on the lawns. So we do have a time to keep to. Professor Thapar. What can we say about Professor Thapar that none of you knows in this audience?
A lot.
She is Professor Emerita. She is Professor Emerita at Nair University, where she has been teaching ancient Indian history until 1991. And before joining JNU, Professor Thapar had taught at Delhi University and at Kurukshetra University. Now, she has been awarded many honorary doctorates from Brown University, Edinburgh University, the University of Chicago, and an honorary D.Litt that has been conferred by Oxford University, University of Calcutta, and Pennsylvania University. She was the recipient of the extremely prestigious Kluger Prize in 2008 for lifetime achievement in the field of history. In 2009, she delivered the keynote address at the 14th World Sanskrit Conference at Kyoto. In 1983, she was the General President of the Indian History Congress, and she's had a long association with the History Congress. Professor Thapar's list of publications is far too long to be mentioned in a short 2-hour panel such as this, so I'll just mention some. The Canonical and Still Used History of India, Volume 1, which was first published in 1966. The Past and Prejudice, Ancient Indian Social History, From Lineage to State, Shakuntala, Texts, Readings, Histories, History and Beyond, the Past Before Us, one of the more recent works, Historical Traditions of Early North India. In addition to being, of course, one of the most well-known public intellectuals. And I want to add a personal line to acknowledge the fact that Professor Thapar is one of the most gracious intellectuals I know, simply because she never says no to anybody. Even the most pesky undergraduate student who asks her a question always receives an answer. And that is, I think, true grace. I should say much more about her essays as well, but it will take me far too long. So welcome, Professor Thapar, to this panel. With your permission, shall I introduce all of you and then you can have your 10 minutes, yes? So Professor Zoya Hassan. Now this is also someone who is extremely distinguished, currently a National Fellow of the Indian Council of Social Science Research. She was Professor of Political Studies between 1979 and 2014, and she was also the Dean of Social Sciences at the last part of her career. She served as a member of the National Commission for Minorities from 2006 to 2009, and she has been a visiting professor at the universities of Zurich, Edinburgh, the Maison des Sciences de l'Homme, Paris, and has held fellowships at the Institute of Development Studies, University of Sussex, Rockefeller Center, Bellagio, and the Center for Modern Oriental Studies, Berlin. Professor Hassan was also the founding director of the Center for Women's Studies at JNU, and that is, of course, one of the great achievements of our university. Amongst her numerous publications are Congress After Indra, Policy, Power and Political Change, Democracy and the Crisis of Inequality, a collection of essays, The Politics of Inclusion, Castes, Minorities and Affirmative Action, Democracy in Muslim Societies, the Asian Experience, and India's Living Constitution, Ideas, practices, controversies. I should also add once more that Professor Zoya Hassan, like many teachers in JNU, is also a public intellectual, writes frequently for the press on matters of political practice and democracy. I'll move on to Professor Ram Ramaswamy, who is currently also continues to be our neighbor, as it were. He's at IIT Delhi, an eminent physicist, a computational biologist, and of course author. He was a faculty member at the School of Physical Sciences for more than 30 years and has been instrumental in making the School of Physical Sciences one of the finest places for physics education and research in the country. He has an MSc from IIT Kanpur and a PhD from Princeton University, and after his postdoctoral research at Caltech, he started his independent research career at the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research and then moved to JNU in 1986 as one of the founding faculty members of SPS. And he is also, importantly, he is also the co-founder of the School of Computational and Integrative Sciences at JNU. He was the Vice Chancellor of the University of Hyderabad and was also the President of the Indian Academy of Science. But I should mention here that his interests go well beyond physics and biology. He has co-edited with Professor Rohini Godbole of the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, a book entitled Leelavati's Daughter that depicts the biography of a large number of accomplished Indian women scientists. And needless to say, the book has received positive reviews all around. Professor Purushottam Agarwal, who is also on our panel, completed his PhD at the Center of Indian Languages in 1985, that is at JNU, under the supervision of Professor Namvar Singh. He was in 2002 a visiting professor at the British Academy, the Faculty of Oriental Studies, University of Cambridge, and at El Colegio de Mexico, Mexico City. Professor Agarwal has taught at the Center of Indian Languages, JNU, from 1990 to 2007. And between 2007 and 2013, he was a member of the Union Public Service Commission, New Delhi. Professor Agarwal's academic interests include Bhakti poetry and its social context, especially the work of Kabir, indigenous or vernacular modernity, non-violence and cultural and literary criticism. He has published widely in these areas. Since 2013, he has been visiting professor, Center for the Study of Developing Societies, New Delhi. And his academic contributions are widely acknowledged. He is the recipient of many awards and honors. He was bestowed the Rajkamal Prakashan Kriti Samman for, and I hope I get this right, Akat Kahani, Prem Ki, Kabir Ki Kavita aur Unka Samay in 2008. In 2002, he was the British Academy Fellow of Wilson College at Cambridge, and in 1997, he was bestowed the Mukutdhar Pandey Samman for Sanskriti, Varchasva aur Pratirod. And in 1996, he was awarded Devi Shankar Awasthi Samman for Teesra Rukh. So no more from me, my friends. I think we'll move directly on to the panel. I'll just tell you what the structure of this afternoon's event is, because we have a very limited time.